Dante's Boxing Nation, Dante's Cooking Nation. We are out here. Where are we at?
We're out here in Bangkok.
There you go. You hear that? I just made her a proud citizen of Long Beach, California. You heard the accent right there.
Ireland.
She's from Ireland. Matter of fact, introduce yourself to the world.
My name's Hannah and I'm from Ireland and I'm the biggest fan of his cooking show.
You hear that?
Yeah.
The biggest fan?
And I'm from Ireland. Sorry.
I'm the biggest fan of his boxing channel too. Like it's the best thing I've ever seen.
Thank you. So you've been watching the videos and everything?
Every day.
All the way in Bangkok, Thailand, y'all.
No,
I'm gonna get it
in
right.
Ireland as well.
In Ireland, you hear that? DBN is international,
My
guys.
churros are ready now.
Because you know, you think other Mexicans are gonna say the same. You think people will say the same shit, that he will not fight a Mexican? You know, fucking all these Barrera and all these guys will say that. They don't give a fuck, you know. They'll fuck anybody that's in front of them. So this motherfucker, they need to grow up some balls, you know. And you know what? That fight with David and Canelo, I don't think is never gonna happen.
Why?
We're not worried because that motherfucker that has no balls, you know. I don't think it's never gonna happen. He doesn't want to fight David. Why? Because he's fucking scared. You know, if he wasn't scared, he would make that fucking fight happen. Everybody wants to see that fight. First row, Mike Tyson will be there, right? But he doesn't want to do it. So to me, that's telling me that he's fucking scared.
This week at his workout in San Diego, and he says if you beat Bivol, he will not fight you because he doesn't want to fight a countryman. He doesn't want to fight another Mexican. What did you make of those comments?
Well, as a fighter, I want to fight with the best anyone and in the ring, and two Mexicans ring guarantees a war, and I don't know why he don't want to fight any Mexican.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So recently, Canelo Alvarez, he's been catching a lot of backlash from the boxing world for becoming the first Mexican fighter to ever, in the history of the sport, say he's not going to fight against Mexican fighters because he represents Mexico. Now, for the fans that haven't been following this story, let me go ahead and sum everything up. Canelo Alvarez does an interview. He's asked about the Bivol Ramirez fight. Canelo says he's rooting for Ramirez to beat Bivol. Reporter asked Canelo Alvarez, are you going to fight Bivol if he does lose? Canelo says, no, I'm not fighting him if he loses to Ramirez. Then the reporter asked Canelo Alvarez, well, are you going to fight Ramirez if he wins? He says, no. Canelo says, no, I'm not going to fight him because I represent Mexico. Now, something else the reporter, he said, or he asked Canelo Alvarez, something people didn't really pay attention to. The reporter asked Canelo, does this mean you're not fighting at 175 anymore? And Canelo Alvarez didn't rule it out. He said he may actually fight at 175 again, which means it depends on the opponent, which also eliminates any excuse of Canelo Alvarez losing to someone at the higher weight class, 175. The fact that Canelo Alvarez said he's still willing to fight at 175 clearly proves that he feels good at the weight class as long as it's against easier opposition. So speaking of easier opposition, once again, Canelo Alvarez, he continues to say, I'm not fighting any Mexican fighters because I represent Mexico. Let me tell you why when Canelo says things like this, obviously it's hypocritical, but he comes off as extremely disingenuous. Because I'm old enough to remember before Canelo Alvarez got beat by Floyd Mayweather, Canelo Alvarez, who was at 154, was calling out a junior welterweight Mexican fighter by the name of Victor Ortiz. So not only was Canelo Alvarez targeting a much smaller Mexican fighter, but Canelo Alvarez was going out of his way to try to get one of these Mexican fighters in the ring. And when I say one of, I'm also talking about Josito Lopez. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Canelo Alvarez, he was real serious about fighting Victor Ortiz after Victor once again lost to Floyd Mayweather. Canelo, he was already negotiating the fight. In fact, it was supposed to happen assuming Victor Ortiz gets past Josito Lopez. But he didn't get past Lopez. Lopez pulled off the upset and he beat Victor Ortiz. So once he beats Ortiz, I'm thinking Canelo Alvarez is going to move on to try to fight someone else in his own weight class. But no, Canelo Alvarez, he decides to fight against Josito Lopez. Once again, Josito Lopez is fighting 2 divisions below Canelo Alvarez. So just think about this for a second. If Canelo Alvarez is saying, I'm not going to fight the Mexican fighter because I represent Mexico, why would Canelo Alvarez go out of his way to put a knockout loss on a Mexican fighter that's 2 weight classes below you? When Lopez, he could have gone on to fight many other fighters in his own weight class, racking up more wins. Canelo didn't have to put that blemish on Josito Lopez's record because after all, he represents Mexico, just like David Benavidez represents Mexico. And it's just so crazy because it's not like there was a shortage of fighters at 154 at this time. Canelo, who claims he doesn't want to fight a Mexican, you had a lot of black fighters that were fighting at 154 at the time. Matter of fact, champions that were calling out Canelo Alvarez, from the Charlo brothers to Demetrius Andrade. And instead of Canelo Alvarez fighting one of those guys or someone else in his own weight class, he decides to go out of his way to fight a Mexican fighter 2 weight classes below him. And that's what Canelo Alvarez calls representing Mexico. Canelo ain't fooling nobody. Whenever the Mexican fighter was easy to beat, Canelo, he pushed everyone out the way so he could fight the Mexican. When it came to Mexicans like Alfonso Gomez, Josito Lopez, a super old faded Angulo, the massive underdog Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., and all of the tons of Mexican fighters that Canelo Alvarez fought earlier on in his career, Canelo doesn't care anything about representing Mexico. Listen, I've already told you guys, this would be completely different if Canelo Alvarez was beating all of the best fighters in boxing. He was beating all of the best black fighters and every other fighter that was a threat to him. If he was beating all of these guys and then he said, I don't want to fight a Mexican fighter because I represent Mexico. If he would have done that, it would not look that bad. But you can't say I'm not going to fight Mexicans, but then at the same time, not fight the best black fighters that are available today. You cannot have it both ways. And let me say this as well, because you guys will also notice the majority of times Canelo Alvarez has been interviewed in particular, it's usually by Mexican reporters. And when they're interviewing him, you'll obviously notice they're never asking Canelo any of the tough questions that fans really want answers to. They always interview him as if they're just a fan of his, and they're trying their best to make sure they don't ask too hard of a question that kind of forces Canelo to contradict himself. And this is the reason why I always call the sport of boxing the wild, wild west of sports. Because in every other real sport, football, basketball, baseball, it doesn't matter if a reporter is interviewing his favorite basketball player, his favorite football player. You best believe that reporter is going to ask the hardest questions, which is what you are supposed to do. You have to do this kind of job with integrity. And this is not what we see from a lot of the people that are interviewing Canelo Alvarez for obvious reasons. It's only common sense if you have been following the sport of boxing when Canelo tells a reporter, I'm not fighting against Ramirez because I'm Mexican, because I represent Mexico. Why didn't any of the reporters remind Canelo Alvarez that almost all of the greatest Mexican fighters fought against other Mexican fighters in great fights? And another question they should have asked to Canelo Alvarez, well, if you're not going to fight Mexican fighters, does that mean you're going to fight Canelo or Demetrius Andrade? Because listen, Canelo Alvarez already said if Bivol loses, he's not going to fight Bivol. But forget that. We already know if Bivol wins, Canelo's not going to fight him. So let's just think about this. Canelo Alvarez, according to him, he's not going to fight any Mexican fighters. That eliminates Gilberto Ramirez, that eliminates David Benavidez. And Canelo has been avoiding Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade for 7 years now. So the question is, if Canelo Alvarez is not going to fight Bivol, not going to fight Zurdo Ramirez, he's not going to fight Jamal Charlo or Demetrius Andrade, who is he going to fight? You guys have been hearing me say for quite some time, the walls are closing in on Canelo Alvarez. And as you guys can see, it's gotten to the point to where Canelo can barely breathe because those walls are closing in so tight right now. I mean, you know it's real bad for Canelo Alvarez when Mexican trainers and boxers are completely disregarding Canelo Alvarez now because of the silly things that he keeps saying about Mexico and everything else. Now, one last point, going back to the reporters, once again, trying to throw all these softball pitches to Canelo Alvarez when they interview him. Something else you will notice is not only are they trying their best to not ask Canelo real questions, some of the reporters actually even go out of their way to try to protect Canelo with logic that makes no sense at all. In the interview with Gilberto Ramirez, the guy that was interviewing Gilberto Ramirez, asking him about Canelo, saying that he's not fighting against Mexican fighters, this reporter actually asked Gilberto Ramirez and his team in the interview, he said, do you think it could be possible that maybe Canelo Alvarez just doesn't want to fight a Golden Boy fighter? Could it be because you represent Golden Boy, the reason why Canelo doesn't want to fight him? We know that excuse makes no sense because Canelo Alvarez's mandatory is David Benavidez, which is a PBC fighter. And Canelo has already fought a PBC fighter by the name of Caleb Plant. So this is how desperate these reporters are to try to protect Canelo Alvarez. They're willing to make themselves look like fools by contradicting themselves just to try to protect Canelo Alvarez, to no avail. Because all they're doing is not only making themselves look worse, but they're making the guy they're trying to protect look worse. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. It will be very interesting to see, assuming Canelo gets past Gennady Golovkin, what direction he decides to go. Because the networks are gonna be putting a lot of pressure on Canelo Alvarez to take a tough fight. They are not gonna pay Canelo Alvarez any type of serious money to take on another cherry pick. They're only gonna pay him good if he takes a challenge. And that's why Canelo ended up taking the Bivol fight. Because once again, the only offers he had on the table was either to fight Errol Spence and Jamal Charlo back-to-back or fight Bivol and Gennady Golovkin. So clearly he went with the European connection and still ended up losing. Let's see what he decides to do after the Golovkin fight. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one. All right, now check this out, guys. If you're looking to repair eczema scars, burns and bruises, dark spots and blemishes, then this right here is the perfect product for you guys. It's called Elo Diki Face and Body Oil. Athletes and top-ranking boxers, they're also using it after training to reduce swelling, inflammation, and to ease the pain. So get yours today. Go to elodiki.com, like them on Facebook, and follow them on Instagram. Fellas, I've got some great news for you. If you've lost your hair or have a receding hairline, the time has come when you can finally get your hairline back through a process called scalp micropigmentation. So here's how it works. It's a hair tattoo that replicates the look of your hair follicles when you have fully shaved it down. So to get this hookup, make sure you follow and contact my man Scalp Carolinas on Instagram. Let me tell you guys about Issa Israel Law Firm. It is a full-service legal practice based in Denver, Colorado, an emerging hub for combat sports and high-altitude training. If you're a fighter inside or outside of the ring and you need a law firm you can trust to fight for you, visit thefighterfirm.com or email help@iilawfirm.com. Legal representation is usually limited to plaintiffs and defendants in Colorado, but iFirm can help anyone in the world with trademarking their business name, logos, and U.S. immigration issues. This brother has been my attorney for a while and helped guide me through all kinds of business and civil issues, so make sure you guys go to thefighterfirm.com.